What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Valley coming at you with a mailbag podcast on my own, as these things tend to be. We're doing a Twitter mailbag this time. This is being recorded before games on Sunday. So if anything happens that makes it like majorly outdated, I'll record an intro. But the stats, everything we're going to talk about, accurate as of Sunday, November 12th. I have about an hour, maybe a little bit more. So I'm going to try and bang through as many questions on Twitter as I can. If I can get to some of the Discord ones, I will. But I like the idea of maybe switching every other week, although Elon killed Twitter a little bit, so we don't get nearly as many mailbag responses on there from the NBA Math account. So if you're on Twitter and you feel like double dipping and you're also in our Discord, if you'd like to send us mailbag questions, though, the best way to do so, you can be on the lookout on Twitter for those solicitations, but join our Discord. The link's in the podcast and YouTube description, or you can email us, hardwoodknocks@gmail.com. I don't check that thing every day, but I will eventually see it, and we can add it to the queue. You're free to DM me. My DMs get to be a mess, though, on Twitter. So, again, there are very different. There are a bunch of different ways you can reach out. But if you'd like to get your question heard on a mailbag and you're not in Discord, hardwoodknocks@gmail.com. But join our Discord. Follow us on all the socials, too. The links to that are in the podcast and YouTube description. And as always, thank you all for your support. We really do appreciate every single one of you. And if you have not subscribed yet, please consider hitting the sub button on YouTube as well as Spotify and Apple. Ratings and reviews on Apple and Spotify help out a ton. If we get some momentum and let's drive us up the Apple charts. Can you all go spam our ratings and let's see them skyrocket once? Those go a long way. If you've done all those things, though, word of mouth recommendations help promote our episodes. Tell people about us, though. That's probably the biggest way to help the podcast grow, aside from the YouTube algorithm at this point. Comment on the YouTube videos. Help the algorithm love us back. Maybe be nice in the comments instead of telling us that we don't watch basketball, in which case anyone who says that, even if they say, if they tell us that we're not following Team X, or we're that our takes are dumb, or we're not watching basketball, you can't do what we do. If you're saying that, you can't cover all 30 teams as well as we do. I'm just going to say that right now. I'm taking off the humble pie. There are probably people in our Discord. There are many listeners that I think could absolutely do what we do. You can't do what we do. If that's your first gut check reaction. And I think that's it. That's all the housekeeping notes, as well as me throwing shade. There was just a lot of hate on our Pacers and Timberwolves clips from the episode where we were actually pretty complimentary of both teams, but you latch onto this thing about us saying Cat has not been good to start the season, or Grant got eviscerated for his Benedict Mathurin take. I guess both of us did because it was a joint video. And then Benedict Mathurin went on to have the two best games of his career. One, clip was recorded beforehand. Two, don't use a 2-3 game sample size, flashes over the course of a 9-game season or whatever, and just expect that to apply to a new normal. And if you disagree, that's fine with the Benedict Mathurin take. I disagreed with what Grant said. Grant even said he might have been being too harsh or hypocritical or cynical, whatever the word was that he used. It's okay to have differing opinions. It doesn't make us dumb. Doesn't mean that we don't watch. But there's nothing wrong with Grant using, we have a full season's worth of data from last year, the struggles in summer league. He has been better to start this season. There have been flashes of more variance in his offensive decision-making. I think it's totally reasonable to say, and it's not an insult, that Benedict Mathurin might top out as a great sixth man. I just thought that was such an odd thing to latch into, even if you think he's been better or has a higher ceiling than Grant does. If you think he has a higher ceiling, if you think he's going to be a star, that's fine. Justify it. But don't come in here and say we don't watch basketball. We're not watching this team, paying attention to this team. When you are saying that, I'm just going to tell you right now, you can't do what we do. You can't. Not sorry. That was not a rant I intended to go on. Maybe I'm feeling spicy on Sunday. I've not taken an edible because I need to go to an event, which is why I'm doing this early in the day. We need to have a mailbag. One, few questions here before we really get into this. Are the solo mailbags fine? I don't like doing these. I love interacting with the questions. I should probably just find someone who's willing to give up everything and drop on a whim and adhere to my schedule whenever I can record these and just throw the questions at me as sort of a guest host. I don't like these. I don't like talking to myself. I know I talk a lot. I know I'm a speed demon when I'm talking. I hate it. I hate these episodes, but I love the concept of the mailbags. I love hearing from you guys. If you enjoy the solo episodes, I'll keep doing them. If you don't like these solo episodes, I will not keep doing them. My time is short as it is. So let me know in the comments or Discord if the solo mailbags play. Grant and I will do joint ones from time to time, but I think it's more important for us to focus on real, not real content. This is real content, but that's just the episodes that are going to age more quickly, where I want to break down games with someone and some of the biggest topics. It makes more sense for us to do that together, but he will be on with mailbag. Shout out to the support on that stat padding episode, by the way. And I want to start this. This is fun. I'm going to ask a question, my mailbag question to everyone. I need to start doing these, especially if you're on YouTube. I want to know what you think in the comments here, but also in Discord. Grant had asked, and the commenters went wild on TikTok. What is the rookie or NBA prospect you were most wrong about in a way that you were too positive on them? My answer was among the two, but I think the one I ended up settling on was I thought Justin Patton was going to be a more athletic, better ball handling Kristaps Porzingis. Grant said that he thought this was kind of reasonable. He said that Ben Simmons was going to be a bigger, faster Grant Hill. A lot of people were high on Ben Simmons. I want to know in the comments what some of the stuff on, people who thought Jared Sullinger was going to be a superstar. Kind of remembering how high people were on Nick Stauskas and Ben McLemore was fun. Someone thought Willie Cauley-Stein was going to be generational. I'm not just singling out Kings draft picks here. I apologize. There was a lot of thought Greg Oden was going to be one of the best big men of all time. So like some of the more reasonable ones, but then kind of these sort of random ones. I'm trying to think of a good one off the top of my head where it's like someone thinking that Avery Bradley was going to be a mega star, not just a really good player. There's of course Frank Ntilikina for me, who I think at the time, I don't know if I wrote this. I definitely said it somewhere. I thought he was going to be the combination of Marcus Smart and Avery Bradley and a better shooter than both. I think was a better shooter and ball handler, I think, than both at the time was what I thought. Or maybe that was into his rookie season. I said that. So that's another wild one. Let me know in the comments, in the Discord, whatever. What is the NBA draft? What is the NBA rookie or draft prospect that you were so high on that you ended up being most wrong about? Let's dive into, how about that for a freaking 7-minute introduction? Let's dig into some news, actually. Two things I wanted to cover, and Grant and I will normally do news together, but the Kelly Oubre Jr. injury is just a fucking bummer. He sustained broken ribs and an assortment of bruises and cuts, according to Shams Charania of The Athletic, to his body after being struck by a car in Philadelphia on Saturday night. He was apparently walking home. Oubre fortunately avoided more serious injuries, but will now miss significant time. Tim Bontemps followed that up by saying that the Sixers have announced Kelly Oubre Jr. suffered a fractured rib on Saturday when he was struck by a motor vehicle, and that he'll be reevaluated in 1 week. That blows. I mean, I'm glad it wasn't more serious and that it seems like he's going to be okay and going to be able to return to a basketball court. He was bang for the buck wise, one of the best free agent signings of the offseason. I still can't believe he went for a minimum. I know how people feel about players who don't pass. He's a bucket, and he's been moving off the ball really well in Philly. He's been hitting his threes. That'll probably come down, but it just sucks. He's having a great season. Definitely, I would have thought earned himself some money in free agency, and hopefully he can come back and pick up where he left off. That's just a bummer. And he's a big part of the Sixers' success. So far, they do have kind of wings to spare. But when you look at their wings, unless I'm just like, I thought about this because they have so many wings, they're not like these super speedster wings. I don't like the Anthony Melton, who's just a little on the smaller end, but he can defend like a wing. So I sort of get it. And Tobias Harris, like that's fine. But like just Furkan Korkmaz, Robert Covington now, you're talking about Nick Batum. Jaden Springer. So it's just, they don't have a lot of like bouncier wings. Maybe this means that KJ Martin becomes a little bit more important, but he's been like not really part of the rotation. So I think that they could miss some of the pace that he plays with when you're looking at, him and Maxey and Melton. Like those guys can play really fast. Hopefully he's fine. Hopefully he's not out too long. And whenever he comes back, I hope he's just as good, because it's been fun to kind of see him being so impactful after, I guess, being forced to sign with the minimum, or maybe he thought this would be a good situation because he knew the Harden debacle was going to implode, but he's made himself some real money so far, and I hope he can continue to do so. And then also shout out to him because he's one of the, I like an NBA player who wears polish on his nails, unironically, not like a Jimmy Butler emo night or emo media day, like just like Kelly Oubre Jr. That guy fucks. Is that what the kids what the kids are saying because he has polish on his nails? No, that's the wrong way of saying it, but I appreciate sort of the offbeat there. And finally, as a news note, the NBA is talking about going to a 2-day draft where they would have this. I'm assuming the first round of the lottery on one day. They didn't get into the structure too much in that Shams and Woj reporting. There's been talk about maybe them adding a third round, which I guess could make sense with the expanded, two-way rules. And now you have the second round exceptions as well. And I'm assuming those would spill over into the third round. I don't have a strong take on this. I do recognize that the second round is just a blur. They have like 2 minutes to pick. All these trades are happening. I know some people use the argument that by having more time in the second round, more trades could unfold. Then I saw John Hollinger, I think, said that there was like 17 trades in the second round this past year, just something wild. So how many, if we have more time, how many more trades are we going to do? I'm all for, I like the idea of one, not having someone like Nikola Jokic get drafted during a Taco Bell commercial, just having that memory, even if they're not in person, to kind of remembering where you are when that happened, because there are just second round picks that go off. I like having that idea. And maybe you then are able to invite more of these prospects over in a case like Jokic, where he's international. Maybe he's not showing up for that if he doesn't think he's going to go in the top 30, but I'd be all for that. What I will say is that the broadcasts need to be tailored accordingly, because people are struggling to, and I understand it could be difficult if you're tasked with, if they don't have a separate NBA draft crew, which I know that ESPN, they have Jonathan Givony still, but like you lose Schmitz. But like aside from Givony and then Jay Billis is going to be on there, okay, fine. Do you want to hear what Kendrick Perkins, and I'm trying not to shit because I know how hard it is to do this job as someone who complains about people saying we don't watch basketball. Do I want to see Kendrick Perkins on TV mimicking spanking as a way of breaking down the game? No. I mean, if the standard of that studio show was already higher, like if the barometer for it, like if they had the cachet and the built up goodwill of what we see of inside the NBA, and not just because we're employed by the same parent company, that's a very enjoyable show, and people get mad about things they say, but they've built up goodwill, I think, in part because the show is actually the show, where it's ESPN is rushing to commercials. And I understand part of why they're doing that, but if you made the show more enjoyable, you could get to a point where maybe the show itself, the studio show itself, is being sponsored, so you don't need to cut to as many of these commercials. I'm not even sure if that's how it works, but if the show had built up more goodwill or was better, you can deal with shenanigans are fun. I'd like to think that this podcast is personable and wacky, in addition to also being super technical and in-depth and thorough. So, but just because ESPN, it's so, and I don't necessarily blame the talent as much for this because of how quickly they are cutting to commercials. Like it's big bang boom. You want to make fun of what Stephen A has to say, or what Kendrick Perkins has to say, but they're given like these with 35-second snippets. And what are you actually supposed to do there? My point being, this is a roundabout way of saying, I don't want to see a second day of the NBA draft if we're not going to see people who have studied these players, who know these players that are getting drafted, because you want the analysis to go along with that event. So forget even adding the third round. And maybe that would be the argument for, well, let's do the lottery. Then we'll wrap up the first round and the second round on that second day. Sure. But if you're going to add the second day of the draft, make sure that you have just the talent and the experience, the familiarity with these players to back up that type of, I would say it's ambitious programming. All for it otherwise, because again, the second round is such a blur. We are heading into the mailbag portion now of this podcast. Really good questions here. Let's start with, and we've gotten this question. This is something similar, but Dr. Justin Quinn asked, why didn't the league make divisions useful again with group play stage of the in-season tournament? It's so the way that they drew, just for anyone who might not be familiar, is they created these 5 pots per conference, 3 teams in each pot. And then what they did was one team was drawn from each pot, and like that made up a group. And the pots were as follows for anyone who can follow along. Pot 1, the teams with the 3 best prior regular season records in the conference. Pot 2, teams with 4th through 6th best records. Pot 3 was 7th through 9th. Pot 4 was 10th through 12th. And pot 5 was 13th through 15th of that conference. I understand why they did it this way, because you don't want to end up with this seems like a better way of redistributing the teams relative to what happened last season. Now, a lot of teams look plenty different compared to last year. You could, a team like the Wizards just now all of a sudden are even worse because they don't have Kristaps Porzingis and Bradley Beal. But you don't also want to have the issue of there are just certain divisions right now that are hellfire compared to the others. And this might be the case for getting rid of divisions, by the way. But anywho, and there's, I think, worth the point of the season, but specifically, like you look at I don't know that there's a shitty division right now. I mean, I'm looking at, okay, there are divisions where there might be 2. sort of pushovers, but they're kind of like in the Atlantic. There's 5 teams that are trying to win right now. In the Pacific, there's 5 what should be really good teams at full strength. In the Southwest, with the Rockets just rolling, the Rockets are rolling, caps lock rolling. Now all of a sudden there's 4 competitive teams because the Grizzlies aren't one of them, and the Spurs are sort of lightning in a bottle. I kind of understand why you got away from divisions. If you wanted to build back up those rivalries, sure. And maybe that would create drama that would then spill into matchups that were being played outside of the in-season tournaments, since that's happening so early. If we're trying to make it from an even field, I do prefer the way, like just trying to even out like the way that the teams are distributed and the level of competition. I know that there are groups that are hellfire compared to others right now. That's how it works out, especially when you're basing this decision off of last year's records where you're seeing a lot of turnover and changes to teams, like the Blazers being one, and even the Jazz, like their records inflated because of the time that what they were doing before the trade deadline last year. What I would maybe be interested in, and this again would make divisions even more useless, is like, do we kind of keep these groups from year to year because you build up rivalries that way and there's more of sort of the one-off occasion to them because it's the in-season tournament game might matter more? Perhaps that's a stupid way of looking at it. If I'm more concerned about them evenly distributing the competition, they should probably stick with what they're doing. But if you want to build up rivalries, I could understand the argument for, well, why didn't they just do it by division? Again, it's a level of competition thing, quite clearly to me. But is that something they're open to doing moving forward? Or could these just be at some point, do we just lock in the groups just to kind of create that drama? So I'm all for trying to build rivalries in the league. And I would imagine, I tried to look, by the way, and see if this is why they did it or why they didn't stick with divisions. I couldn't find anyone who had answered that question. So Adam Silver, I know you're listening. Why don't you just get at me? You can email me, DM me on Twitter. You're probably in our Discord. So however you feel like you want, text me, however you feel like you want to get in touch. This question's super interesting. It's a little bit, it happened before the season, but I'm just getting around to it now, from Matisse Thibel's Wingspan on Twitter. Question is, who do you think will make strength / physicality / taking and giving contact the biggest part of their game? Victor Wembanyama, Chet Holmgren, or Evan Mobley? Very interesting question here. I think the answer is going to wind up being Evan Mobley. I'm going back and forth. I have Mobley written in my notes, but I keep wanting to go with Wemby. When it comes to Chet, I do think that he's mostly going to be in more of a play finisher role. And it's ironic, he's the one that's playing center the most of the time. So there's going to be more physicality on defense. And so maybe that makes him the right answer just based off what's happening immediately right now. However, I'm kind of considering it more on offense, and Evan Mobley of these 3, just because the pick and pop element of Chet, and then him being around so many guys who can dominate the ball. Wemby just being in everything, like person in Mabob, someone we've just never, the likes of which we've never seen before, going to catch the ball all over the floor. They're not going to, use him as a facilitator. It doesn't seem like, he has the freedom to self-create, but you're going to run stuff from him in the middle of the floor. And so with Mobley, I feel like there's going to be a lot of more center floor touches, elbow type touches as we move forward. We don't always see a ton of them. Also, because that you are going to play invariably compared to Wemby, he's come out at the 5 a little bit. Like the Spurs have just trotted that out and been like, hey, yeah, here we go. We'll try this. But Mobley will play more center. I think long-term, that might still be his best position. I know Cavs fans don't really like when people say that. But he's just you have Jared Allen there. But if Jared Allen's injured, as we saw at the beginning of the season, or when you're looking at backup minutes, he will be used as a center. I don't know it's a center on both ends of the floor who's featured, where it's just Chet. I don't know if he'll ever have the center floor self-creation, like let's slow things down, run things through him, because of, not that he's not capable of it. That dude's floor game is off the charts, but because of who's around him right now. And so I think it's more critical for Mobley to develop this part of his game. And I do think that it's going to end up being him. And he's just not going to have the sheer, like when it's Wemby, just have that sheer, he has that sheer size advantage over everyone. So he doesn't necessarily have to rely on physicality as much. I will say for Chet, I think I mentioned this on a podcast already. I am very impressed with how physical he's been. I know he's been bounced around a little bit against some of the larger front lines, but I've actually been really impressed with his strength level relative to what his frame looks like. Good question, though. And Matisse Thibel's Wingspan had another question that I'd like to save for Grant, so we'll get to that one whenever we talk to Grant. I have it in my notes. Next comes from PP, shout out for covering the Pacers as long as your internet would hold up. I've been catching arrows in Indy for this take, but I'm open to sending Mathurin and whatever else is needed within reason to Toronto for OG Anunoby. Would love your guys' take on that. Okay, so first of all, someone who watched the Indiana or listened to the Indiana Pacers clip and didn't think that we don't watch the Indiana Pacers. Shout out PDP. I love you all of a sudden. No, I always loved you because you listen to this podcast. I love every single person, even though they might be hate listening, who consumes this podcast. Why are you getting roasted for that take? I love the fit of OG and Indy, especially given what they need most. And like, if he comes in and you just have someone who defends all 5 positions, or you look at it this way, oh, like the 4 problems are just solved. And now maybe we can, Bruce Brown and Aaron Nesmith are able to, guard more natural size players. I think Nesmith specifically is the one where you kind of look at that. Do you think it's worth, my questions would be, do you think that he comes in and you automatically are that much better defensively? I believe you would be if you're keeping Turner, which I was listening to a podcast today that was running through like Miles Turner trades. I'm like, the Pacers are trying to win. Why are we still on the Miles Turner trade stuff, especially like right now when they're, sitting in 3rd place in the Eastern Conference or whatever it is. I find it weird that PDP would be roasted for this. Now, the issue here, the roasted, I think, is extreme. People who are against it, I get it. OG Anunoby's going into free agency. The way the extension rules are going to work, if they wanted to offer him the max, do they even have enough time after if the trade happened right now, would they have enough time to extend him before the season's over? He doesn't matter. He's not going to sign it. 4 years, 116.2, I believe, would be the max. I think that the Toronto Raptors would have signed him to that already, as averse as they are to signing their players, to keeping their own players all of a sudden, it seems. So there's the risk of, one, if you wanted to, you could go and create the cap space necessary to chase him this summer. But that's a risky way of looking at things. Would he choose? I know he has ties to Indiana, but would he choose Indiana over some of these other teams, maybe that are better positioned to win? Or you have Tyrese Halliburton here, and you have Benedict Mathurin there. If you're going to sign him, can you promise him as large of an offensive role as he wants? You need to be sure that he's staying, is my point, because he is hitting free agency. And this is someone who everyone of all timelines will want. It's not just the teams that might have cap space when you're looking at Philly, when you're looking at Orlando. He is a player, especially relative to the free agent class coming up and how many that the Clippers kind of just take off the board by having them on their team. Although maybe lots of people don't want James Harden at this point. You have to be sure that he's coming back because he is someone who is good enough for teams to create cap space for, not to build their entire future around where we'll give you up 8 first-round picks. But he is good enough to where he will have interest, where even if teams don't have cap space, they will make it if it means signing OG Anunoby to X. If you don't know that he's staying and you have that deal in place beforehand, essentially where you know the number, let's just say, I'm just throwing a number out here. Let's say it's 4 and 124 or something. I mean, he's got to be looking at some of these Devin Vassell, Jaden McDaniel. Like, it's going to cost you at least that annually, if not more, to get him. So let's just say the number is worked at 4 and 120, which I think winds up being around what was Vassell, 5 and 135. So it ends up being more as an average average. So let's just say the number's 4 and 120, 4 and 124, whatever, average of $31 million a year. You need to know that you're keeping him, because to give up Mathurin when you have, who is not only showing flashes right now of more just complicated, deeper decision-making, had played really good, probably the best defensive performance I've ever seen from him with that game against Milwaukee, by the way. Regardless, no matter how you feel about him, Grant would even acknowledge this. You have that draft equity invested in him. You can't trade that for someone who might leave. And I think that's where the hang-up would be. Because in a nutshell, yes, I would trade Mathurin for OG Anunoby. I think you have Tyrese Halliburton. You could also invest. I know Mathurin does stuff off the dribble that Buddy Hield is never going to do. And Buddy Hield is never going to have, that Milwaukee-esque type of defensive performance. But if you have Turner and OG, you could look at keeping Buddy. You have Bruce Brown there. You have other perimeter options that are small enough to where I don't think that you should be opposed to trading Mathurin. Now, what is it within reason to get him? Is it Mathurin and a pick? If that's the only way you get Anunoby is Mathurin and a first, that's not an unreasonable cost, guys. I know Pacers fans will probably blanch at it. And if you think that Mathurin is going to be an all-star, fine. Then fine. You want to keep him. But OG Anunoby addresses more of a need for you right now. For me, I would view it as, and I don't think OG Anunoby is capable of this, I want to be clear, but do you view someone in Mathurin who can run the show with Tyrese Halliburton off the floor? I'm not confident he could develop into that player as a passer. As a scorer, absolutely. He might already be there to, anchor those units. However, the data without Halliburton on the court is bad once again for the Pacers. But if you believe that Mathurin is going to be that player, then I understand not wanting to give him up in this deal. I don't know if Toronto would have interest in him. That's just not the type of player they normally go for. They could certainly use shot creation, though. They're also the other thing that makes it difficult here is Toronto's not dead in the water like we all thought. The Scotty Barnes leap has changed a lot of things for them. And we've all been pretty open about acknowledging, well, they did trade that top 6 protected pick in 2024 for Jakob Poeltl. They're not just going to blow it up. I mean, they might, but they're not guaranteed to tank. So your offer is going to have to be super aggressive, which to me, there's no way you're getting out of an OG Anunoby deal without giving up Benedict Mathurin. You could try to sell them on Jarris Walker, but they have Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam, and Jakob Poeltl, and you're not even really playing Jarris Walker at the moment. So his trade value you could say it's net neutral, still sort of the mystery box, but he hasn't improved by being relative to the minutes that he's been on the court. Mathurin's trade value's probably improved just over the past week. So Pete, I don't think you should be roasted for it. I would do it. My two issues are, what is the additional cost? And if I'm the Pacers, my hard line is we will give you another first round pick and we'll make the money work here. But like it's Mathurin, that pick. We could talk about seconds. We could talk about Andrew Nemhall. Like we could include it. So the ancillary pieces, yes, we could negotiable. But if it's Mathurin and 2 firsts, I think you're too invested in Mathurin. I think that he has at least shown enough to where you can be skeptical of like giving up 2 firsts on top of him. It's just too much for a guy that you're now acquiring for the right to pay. And then that is the second issue. Do you think that he would stick around? Otherwise, that's not a terrible take at all. Just flat out. It's not a terrible take to say I think the Pacers should give up Mathurin if it means getting OG Anunoby, if the rest of the package is within reason. Next question comes from, which ended up being way harder than I wanted it to be, from Texas Blocker Texas Ranger. What is Keyonte George's ceiling with this Jazz roster? With this specific Jazz roster, and we're seeing Keyonte George now being featured more prominently. That's kind of what happens when Jordan Clarkson's your best passer. On this exact roster, like there's a lot of space for him to operate, but I don't know that do you think he's going to be the one that it's such a weird, I got too caught up in the framing of this question of, well, he's just so young. And like, is this roster really not going to change? Because that's going to be issues defensively, even with Keyonte George's size. So just in general, when I look at him, he can kind of dance with the ball, almost seems to prefer the tough angled layups. It's great. I saw when he was coming out, a lot of people were comparing him to these combo guards who weren't really good passers, or they were, ambiguous passers. You didn't know what they were going to be. I think it's great for the Jazz to know that, oh, this dude is 6'4". He's a rookie, not in the most ideal circumstances right now, although Utah's spacing is, at least the offense should be better, but the spacing a lot of times is set up to give him room to maneuver. His assist to turnover ratio is better than it was at Baylor. And so that's just already a win for them. Like I said, he's 6'4". That's great size for the position. I look at him and he's not like super quick or explosive though. And so I don't know, like, what does that mean for his ceiling? I don't want to say that I think he plays like these players, but when I kind of look at them, it's Kyrie with worse handles, just kind of the types of passes he's making. I could see him being a better passer, but even being able to segue into type of that off guard role if you ever get someone who's more dominant. The other one that kind of stood out, bigger Darius Garland to me. I don't think he's as fast. There's more maybe shiftiness to what he's doing, where it's like it's like wiggle, as I think the basketball geeks, the real sickos like to say, that maybe Darius Garland has, who there could be more of a change of speed thing from here. Or he's got more just blow by speed on him when he's fully healthy. I know at points it's been weird this season. Feels like he might be bailing out a little bit early in the lane. I think that's a fair ceiling to set. I'm not saying he's going to reach it, but a lot of people, I saw Jaden Hardy comps was a big one. What was it? I did see Bradley Beal a couple of times. That would be a fine outcome. I think he winds up being a better passer than Beal based off what I went back and watched some of the stuff, like the passes that he's already thrown. And I think he's going to be, I'm surprised that people were so low on his passing. That felt a lot of, okay, college spacing. He also wasn't there, as far as I know. I didn't watch him. So he also wasn't their primary, like this is someone who was kind of sounded like he was more of an off guard anyway. I don't view him as he's a combo guard, but he can be a floor general. And so I think that would be fair. So I'm saying his ceiling, Kyrie's probably going to make the Hall of Fame. I'm not comparing the two as players, but that feels like what Darius Garland is now, that level of player was last season where, okay, he's made an all-star game and you're kind of waiting. Okay, what does it look like on defense? He's 6'4", so he's bigger than Darius Garland. I do see with some of the way that he passes, and I was not going to make this comp because I really don't think it's a fair one. He's a better passer already, but the way he passes the ball and some of the way we've seen him get to some of his pull-ups so far, I was like, oh, there's like a little bit of Donovan Mitchell there. There's a lot of different players that kind of stood out. I'm gonna go with bigger, slightly slower, more shiftier Darius Garland. How's that, Blocker Texas Ranger? Next question comes from, we got 2 Orlando Magic questions. I know this because I grouped them together in the doc that I'm using. We'll start with Tony's. Is Jalen Suggs turning a corner or just in the middle of the hot streak? My answer is yes. I think he could be. I don't expect him. The past 2 games, he shot the hell out of the ball from 3. I don't think he's going to shoot 1,000,000,000% from 3 all year, but he kind of showed a turn last year as someone who could make his open threes. He's hitting his above the break threes, but he's also spacing to the corner more often this year. I think that's a positive, even when they're not going in. This is more anecdotal. It feels like he's making quicker decisions away from the ball as well. It's where he's coming to go when he's going to get it. Like he will go and get it, or he's going to keep it. He catches it, he keeps it moving, and then maybe he'll relocate afterwards. It feels like I'm seeing more of that. Magic fans could definitely speak if they've watched every single game that he's ever played, can speak more to that than me. I think the bigger thing with him is there is more variability in his drives. He's finishing better at the rim. It was the game against Milwaukee. He had a couple really nice left-handed drives. So there's a little bit more variance there. I know he talked about when he was injured in 2022 or was it 2021 that he did a lot of dribbling with his left hand. So it makes sense that he's a little bit like ambidextrous. It feels like he's more ambidextrous this season. And then the variability is not just in that. It's more so to me, he's passing on 41.7% of his drives with an assist rate of 16.7%. Last year, 29.7% pass rate, 7.7% assist rate. So he's passing more. The passes are translating to assists without there being some major uptick in talent around him. Like, yeah, they've added like some guys, and then there's also just, these players are going to grow. They're going to get better. But this is the base. This is the crux of the core that was there last year. And so he's making smarter passes, and that variability is important. Also, a fun fact as I record this, here's every player who has finished as many drives as Jalen Suggs while shooting as well, which is over 53%, and then matching or eclipsing his assist rate. Jamal Murray, may his hamstring continue to heal, and Spencer Dinwiddie. That's pretty good company. And I would view it, we know what he does on defense. It's basically controlled chaos, and the assignments he takes on, they're tough assignments, and like he does a great job by and large. He can do stuff on the ball. He can also take some chances away from it, but he is for stuff where it becomes ungoverned chaos. There is the controlled chaos element of him where he is a type of perimeter defensive player that opposing units kind of have to plan around, and just him and Markelle Fultz, when Fultz is healthy, able to play them together when Wendell Carter Jr. is healthy. Like, I want to see the two of them. I want to see more when Fultz is healthy with Suggs and Anthony Black. I don't know what the offense looks like. Like that's quintessential Paolo at the 5 territory, and then play them with Franz and just see what that looks like in extended run, not just in sort of fits and bursts. And so I think this is a turned corner for Jalen Suggs. I saw someone compare him. They think that he was going to have a Marcus Smart career arc. That would be an exceptional career arc to have. I do believe there's a more talented scorer in there, not necessarily as a passer, maybe as more of this playing within himself passer, but like Marcus Smart has also had to do a ton of like the pick and roll or just, from scratch table setting volume that Jalen Suggs should never have to do with, as long as Fultz and Franz and Paolo Banchero is there. So I think and look, him hitting his three is a big deal because I've seen this is in pushback that I thought was interesting, and that'll lead us into the next question. Magic fans talking about like, I can't remember which game it was where they kind of lost at the end they had a chance to win. It was a wide open 3, but it was like, kind of, that's the point, is defenses are so comfortable leaving a lot of players open on this team still. You want to improve that. And Suggs hitting his threes above the break, no less, is a really big deal. But just sort of all over the court where it's, oh, he's in the corner more, but he's also hitting his above the break threes. Big deal for the Magic. Next question, also Orlando Magic related, from Daniel Mortensen III. And this dovetails with what I was just talking about. Who would be a better fit for the Magic? Buddy Hield, Anthony Simons, or Zach LaVine? So I'm not ranking these players in terms of how good they are, because Zach LaVine is the best player of these three. I rank them in terms of what I actually think the best fit is, and not necessarily in likelihood, but a player that I could see the Magic actually going for. If it's, we're close to the trade deadline, we're super competitive, the defense is still hellfire, but we're 25th in half court offense like they are right now. And we could, and I'm about to get into why this is my first pick. Buddy Hield, I think, is the best fit here. He needs the ball the least of these three. He's the best movement shooter of these three. He might be, he's not the best. Zach LaVine has the ceiling as a passer, and like Anthony Simons and Zach LaVine have sort of the self-starting passing that Buddy Hield were not. But if you're looking for like touch passes or like swinging the ball really quickly in transition, Buddy Hield's better that. He's a better complement. I think Anthony Simons is close. Now, what I also like about Buddy Hield, though, is that he is going to fly out in transition. And this Magic team could really use some transition juice. I don't know why they don't run more often. Every time I look at their transition frequency, I'm always just kind of disappointed. And this season, they're at 19th in transition frequency. But the biggie for them is just, I think that they could stand to, there's the forced turnovers, whatever. Off of live rebounds, just run. And Buddy Hield will do that. He will run after makes as well, by the way. And so you put him in, and it's also just, it's so low stakes, because if you get Zach LaVine, you're viewing him as a core player. Is that tough to do when I've said this, you don't need to give up Paolo, Franz. You need to give up I think if you could just build it around salary and picks, to be honest with you, to get Zach LaVine at this point with where Chicago's going. If they're actually going to be open to moving him, that's the route they might almost be forced to go. But Buddy Hield is just more complimentary. He will come cheaper. And so that's all right. We're going to have to start thinking about Franz's next deal. He's extension eligible after this year. Paolo's deal will be here before you know it. Markelle Fultz is entering the final year of his contract right now. Wendell Carter Jr. won't be cheap forever. And so I like him as a compliment. Also, I think probably costs the least. Anthony Simons is banged up right now, but I think his contract's pretty good. He'd be my second pick. That dude can just stroke it off the dribble more than Buddy Hield, which is important. Buddy Hield just being off ball and knowing the players that the Magic have already in place and thinking, I don't think Buddy Hield's not going to cost you Jalen Suggs. He's not going to cost you Paolo or Franz, and so, or Fultz even, if you don't want him to. And so those ball handlers are going to be intact. Simons is second for me pretty easily because he straddles both lines. I think LaVine is the highest end swing, and he could come and I think make this. You put him on a team that is built to insulate him defensively, where if you're keeping Suggs and you're keeping Fultz as part of any deal, and even Wendell Carter Jr., like, you are insulated. Like, and Anthony Black, you're able to insulate him if it's just built around picks and salary, or even if you're keeping, I would assume Fultz would stay. So if you're keeping one of Suggs or Black, like, then you're all of a sudden able to insulate him defensively. It's just, do you want him? He can be complimentary, but he's also going to have more of a from scratch need. And when you have Paolo and Franz there, I don't think you want to do anything that's going to infringe upon their volume too much, that on-ball volume too much at this point. I think you could acquire Zach LaVine and be incredible just because he becomes your third option behind Franz and Paolo, just because Paolo will be the better passer. Franz, it's sort of iffy, but like Zach LaVine just doesn't, he waxes and wanes with his vision. And so I would trust Franz there more. And you have Fultz. So you could kind of just, you could balance it out to where it ends up in net that Zach LaVine is your third option, essentially, or your third best player. And that's probably the ideal role for him. I think he's still good enough to be a number two, but just the way he plays sometimes is just, I would like him on this team. I think Buddy Hield is just sort of the more natural fit. Great question, though. And I think it's fair the Magic be thinking along this route. They're not just because the defense is good enough now, but it plugs such a hole and it makes life ultimately easier. And look at some of their offense where it's like Franz and Paolo just really having to drive into bodies. And are they trying to draw a foul or get these tough finishes? So Buddy Hield, Anthony Simons, even Zach LaVine, they'd all open up the floor. And that's the type of acquisition I think that they need. Next question comes from Jordan Scott. Do you think the lockdown defense of KCP is being overlooked? He shut down some great scorers through 9 games. I think it's fair to say he's underappreciated. I know a lot of people said that he'll be in the all defense discussion. No more positions. And to beat out some of these bigs when we're just like, I mean, look at some of the seasons they're having between Mitchell Robinson, Rudy Gobert is definitely in the defensive player of the year running right now. Just like, Giannis or Brook Lopez will end up there by the end of the season. Evan Mobley will end up there by the end of the season. There's just so many. Draymond Green is going to be right there. Bam Adebayo, of course. There's so many talented bigs right now that it could just be hard for him to make all defense. Now, I'm not saying he needs to make all defense. I do think by and large, he's probably underappreciated though. Looking at just the assignments he tackles, he spent guard Steph, guard Luka, guard SGA, guard Brandon Ingram, etc. Like there's really it's kind of 1 through 4 when you really because Luka's a power forward who's also a point guard. It's like this is to me essentially someone who can guard 1 through 4. What's also interesting is that you've had nights where he is like as a team, like yes, Steph Curry. Like I don't buy too much into the the shot against data like for players just because you don't know how that possession unfolded. It's more so when you look at like what is the team scoring when Kentavious Caldwell-Pope defends Steph Curry, and the fact that the Warriors averaged under a point per possession on any possessions in which KCP spent some time on Steph Curry, that's a good harbinger. The other thing I will say is he has spent time on Luka, SGA, Steph, Ingram, didn't commit a shooting foul against either of those 4, committed only 1 shooting foul against Anthony Edwards. For someone who does what he does and like his foul rate on those players, shooting foul rate, I should say, is not higher. I mean, sign me all the way. Like that's a skill. And it's just, even in general, looking at the breadth of assignments he covers, he's averaging 2.4 fouls per game right now, which would be a career high. He's also happening 32.8 minutes per game is close. Like that's the most he's logged in quite some time. So per 36, he's at 2.7. That's not the highest mark of his career. It's the second highest mark, but that's a reasonable rate when you're sort of looking at the types of players he is covering. And so I absolutely think you could make the case that, and I think I just did, that he is an underappreciated defender. And this is just someone that CP in KCP stands for championship player. Like the teams that he goes to are just better with him. And there's been I think he's been a big part of, they've rolled this out. I've seen it a few times and it's only been in small bursts, but it's going to be Jokic and KCP and then 3 bench players. And it's normally been Reggie Jackson, Peyton Watson, and Christian Brown. And that lineup is absolutely killed defensively. KCP, it's early. It's early. He's the highest net rating swing on the Nuggets. That means something at any point, even the first game of the season, because Nikola Jokic exists. And that is the net rating swing king among high volume rotation players. The fact that he has the highest net rating swing on the Nuggets right now is just mind melting. So yeah, I think you could, it's weird because people, I think Nuggets fans certainly appreciate him. And like after the way that he, like watching him and through 2 championship runs at this point, I don't think he's underappreciated in the lexicon of discussion. I think people understand that KCP is a winning player, but when they look at him, it's kind of like maybe a gap filler, super complimentary. And he is probably a lot better on defense than credit, or I would say a lot more important to what, by the way, the Nuggets are 6th in half court defense as I record this. He's a lot more important to those things happening than he receives credit for. That is just absolutely for certain because of what he allows other players to do. Where it's, Jamal Murray's a really tough defender, but you don't want him having to go up against you don't want him having to chase around a lot of these guys, even though he invariably will because of the position he plays. And to have KCP and Aaron Gordon on the same team, and then even Michael Porter Jr. defending the way he has for much of the season, that's just a luxury. And that also, you get lost in the shuffle of that because Aaron Gordon's a fantastic defender. Michael Porter Jr. has improved so much on that end of the floor in net that it's kind of lost in the shuffle there. But it's also high volume offensive players stand out the most, and he's not super high volume. Plays aren't being run for him. He's not initiating the offense, and that could also be a reason why he gets lost in the shuffle. I feel like it's harder to stand out as a defensive specialist, even if you have a floor spacing capability at the other end, than it is if you're just more of an offense first player. That might be asked backwards. I think it speaks to maybe how hard it is for people to understand what's going on with NBA defenses, myself included there. Next question comes from Lee. Asked about the Bucks defense. Might be the single most frequent question we've had. We had it in the last mailbag. Grant brought it up on the last podcast as well. 3rd podcast in a row. Their defensive rebounding is abnormally low, which I find is just to be weird. They're now middle of the road in opponent rim frequency because they've switched Brook Lopez back to more drop. Ever since they made that move, so that game against the Knicks on November 3rd, they are 8th in opponent, the share of opponent shots coming at the rim and 5th in percentage allowed. So that's better. But man, you kind of look at what's happening, and the defensive rebounding's been weird. I'll chalk that up to some noise right now. They're 25th in half court defense, though. Ball containment has been a biggie with the way that Damian Lillard is going to fall behind when I know he's missed time lately, that he's going to fall. I mean, you're even looking at Cameron Payne's going to play games. You run into the same issues. The degree to which they can fall behind on plays really hurts the Bucks. The Bucks remain dead last in opponent transition frequency. And that's weird because they're not rebounding like offensive misses at a high clip. They need to I don't mean to boil it down. They got to get back quicker on these live ball misses. They don't seem to get matched up quickly enough in those situations. It's been getting, some of it could be long rebounds, but we know just because Damian Lillard is there, Seth Partnow has done a great job of talking about this. Having someone like that does not necessarily correlate to more long rebounds, but they've gotten burned on some long rebounds from what I've seen. I don't know if it's disproportionate to what other teams are doing, but there are just a lot of times where it's too easy to get behind their guards in transition. Malik Beasley, Dame Lillard, campaign. That needs to be something that's better. And other times, look, I'm going to be honest. It's easy. It's also very easy to me to get behind Bobby Portis in transition. There's been Giannis when he's shooting outside the restricted area. It kind of feels like he's watching a little too much, not attacking the glass, just sort of watching. And that's been weird. There are moments where Brook Lopez feels like he's lazing back, and he's not supposed to be a super speedster anyway. Middleton definitely doesn't have it. They just feel a little slower collectively, and that might have to do with age, Brolo and Middleton specifically. Dame not being strong suit there, having Malik Beasley on this team now. They got to get back and matched up more quickly in transition. I think that would go a long way. Some other things they could do, because Lee wants to know what, if anything, can fix it. So I think playing MarJon Beauchamp more will actually help. He battles more defensively than Beasley. And I would even say Pat Connaughton, when you're looking at the level of assignments he can do, he might get burned by those players. But if you don't have to send as much help, or it's, the team, but that player is scoring a lot, but you're free to not have to have Giannis come out as often, I think that helps you out by default. And then the other thing is just, could you trade for someone? Would MarJon in seconds and salary get you Alex Caruso? Probably not at this point. So some lower end options where I think it would just come down to salaries and seconds. Once one of these players can't be traded yet, it's Ayo Dosunmu. That's someone, I don't know if Chicago would help out, a division rival or someone who's their neighbor, let's say. But that is someone that could help this team. Dorian Finney-Smith, what does that cost you? Would the Nets even make him available? Torrey Craig at some point this year. Royce O'Neal. Patrick Williams, what does he cost? I don't think you have this. It's not MarJon Beauchamp. I don't think gets you Patrick Williams. And you could argue how much of an upgrade is that. I think defensively, based off what I saw last year from Patrick Williams, it would be Jayshawn Tate. He is playing in Houston. Tari Eason's back though. When Amen Thompson's healthy, could he be gettable? What you have to ask yourself is, do you have enough shooting in the half court to then be like, feel the spacing liability at that end? Or are you so invested in, okay, because we have Giannis and he's still going to take these threes, but we want to make sure that whoever is in that spot also can at least reasonably shoot threes, in which case, like Jayshawn Tate gets iffy there. I would assume so low volume. Even Alex Caruso, let me be clear. If you can get Alex Caruso, you get Alex Caruso. That would be the way to fix it. I think they have the personnel, though, I will say this, to be a lot better than they have been. Is that damning with faint praise? Maybe. I predicted them to have a top 5 defense this year. I still think they have that potential. The biggest thing to stand out for me, now that Lopez is dropping more specifically, it's the transition stuff. And that's a everyone thing, excuse me. It feels like it's addressable. Maybe not, if you just don't think that Brook Lopez and Middleton can move better. Giannis, again, maybe I'm wrong. That's anecdotal stuff. I'm trying to incorporate that in addition to the stats. It's definitely too easy to get behind their guards. And so that's something you need to neutralize. They missed Javon Carter in that vein too, from both a ball containment perspective and someone who could do that. Our next question comes from Ryan Yost. We're about to do a whole podcast on this type of thing, so I'll try not to spend too much time here. My notes here are out of control. Ryan Yost asks, who's the surprise team or teams that is most likely to sustain its early season success? And how about the surprise struggling team or teams most likely to turn things around? So I'm surprised to stay. I looked at the East. I don't think there's like a surprise in the East right now. If you want to say, okay, the Pacers being in third, but it's just we've dealt with such a small sample. So I don't know if there's any big shock you surprise in the East that we need to say is going to sustain. The Mavs in the West, I think it might be sustainable, especially because they're a team that's incentivized to trade for a defensive upgrade on the perimeter, and they can still move a first round pick in addition to just some of the players they have. I think that's it on this, like the good surprises that I think are just going to be sustainable in large part because I don't know who else I'm floored by. It's, Orlando is just, they've won games the way that I thought they were going to win games. So I get like, do you want to say it's just even Minnesota? I guess you could say the 6-2, that's a good one. I believe, but I already believed in Minnesota. So that's why I kind of they didn't spring to mind immediately. And there's the Rockets. I can't get there. Do I think that they're going to be like a playoff team? They might be more feisty on the defensive end, though, than I was really expecting them to be. I think I just underestimated the idea of, oh, well, you have Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks and like Jabari Smith, is just going to be moved around a bunch. Alperen Sengun's been pretty like not bad as a straight up rim protector as well. The other thing with them, I just wonder because he's missed time, if you're going to give a prominent role to Amen Thompson, does it actually hurt you? If it's between Houston and Minnesota, I'm going to vote Minnesota as the early season surprise. That will be more sustainable. I believe in their defense. I really would like to see them get some more shooting on the offensive end. Maybe that normalizes a little bit as Karl-Anthony Towns gets better, but is like kind of a combo wing for them, or even they could stand to have another guard there just because Anthony Edwards can play the wing. But I think it's them because I'm in such a big believer of their defense, and Ant can drive these preternatural offensive performances on any given night. Struggling teams gets a little bit more interesting. There are some easy ones. The Bulls are cooked, blow it up, get them just, I don't even want to have to, pretend that I want to watch them anymore. I'm kind of worried about how the Heat are going to generate offense with the way that Jimmy's been playing. He did look good against the Lakers, but they're 27th in offense overall. They're 21st in half-court offense. Injuries to Caleb Martin and now Tyler Hero certainly matter. They're not getting to the rim nearly enough. I feel like they need a trade. I can't bring myself to panic just yet about the Clippers, but it's time to like circle that button. Just let's see how this does with more time. I do feel like they need to shake up the rotation, whether it's, do you eventually, with a healthy Terrence Mann, is he starting? I saw Justin Russo propose that maybe you actually need to start Norman Powell so you can insulate him better defensively, and that by default should make the bench better. But so I think the Clippers will get better, but I'm not picking them as a team that I think will turn around. I don't know what to do with the Lakers. It has been such a weird start. Yes, they've dealt with a lot of injuries. Very poor start from Austin Reeves, who's already been demoted from the starting lineup. D'Lo did show some steadiness in the non-LeBron minutes against the Suns, and so that might be like something to latch onto. But the Lakers are plus 5.6 per 100 possessions with LeBron on the floor and a minus 32.7 without LeBron. They're also a minus 41.8 in the minutes Davis logs without LeBron. During that stretch, they're shooting 16% from three, 52% at the rim, while opponents are shooting 48% from three. Those are not things that are going to sustain. I'd like to see a bunch of the lineup, and I know that injuries have impacted this as well, even with Reeves playing the way he is. Reeves, Prince, Hachimura, Wood, Davis feels like a way that you could navigate the absence of LeBron at both ends of the court. Maybe you need to have, if Gabe Vincent is healthy and you're going to trust him to play better, him instead of Reeves. I like the Prince, Hachimura, Wood, Davis combo, though, kind of tethering that to non-LeBron units. But it's complicated for them. Maybe they'll shoot better, but like the defense not being great certainly complicates things. The caveat, a lot of this early season stuff, opponents probably won't shoot 39% from three forever, but the Lakers are getting hurt at the rim when players reach there. I think you look at some of the players they're starting next to AD and then how responsible AD is for stuff that's happening away from the basket, putting them in some compromising situations. Only the Spurs allow more points per play on offensive rebounds, and the Lakers are actually allowing offensive rebounds at a higher rate. They're 20th in the frequency of putback plays for opponents. I'm going to say I think they turn it around-ish, but if you thought they were a shoo-in to be one of the 2 or 3 best contenders in the West, that's one that might be stepping on the toes of probably Peace or Panic, which Grant and I are doing this week. That's a team I'm iffy on. The one that I'm confident, the Suns will stabilize and they will turn it around. And so the Clippers and the Lakers, I think, will turn it around, but I'm not sure. The Suns are going to be fine. I don't know if maybe they'll be a little bit worse when it comes to their title stock. Let's see the 3 stars play together a little bit more often. They're going to be fun. Bradley Beal just came back. Like, let's give them some time. Next question comes from, let's go to, since I'm running out low on time here, Nico, excuse me. Best Spurs lineup by net rating this season. So I did this minimum of 10 possessions / played 2 games together. It's such a tiny sample anyway, but that's what I did. So it's the lineup of Trey Jones, Devin Vassell, Victor Wembanyama, Zach Collins, and Doug McDermott. They have a 92.4 net rating, anchored by 100% shooting at the rim. I would argue that they just haven't shot that many attempts at the rim. And then 60% from 3. That's a lineup I think you look at, it's like, yeah, I mean, I get why that'd be working. You have 3 players you trust defensively, maybe 4 because of the ball pressure Trey Jones can give you, and then Doug McDermott just sort of flying all the way around out there. So, Nico, that has been their best lineup to date. That was a quick one, so it looks like we're going to be able to fit in some more. Next question comes from Tom L. This might be quick to answer, was not quick for me to find out, but what is the Lakers free throw differential per game after the NBA officials sleepless nights tweet last year? So that was January 29th. So from that day, because I believe they tweeted it in the day, we're working with a sample size of 57 games, excuse me. 32 regular season last year, then the 16 playoff games the Lakers have, another 9 games that I included in the sample size for this year. So 57 games. I was actually blown away by how high the free throw discrepancy was. The Lakers during the last 57 games have attempted, and it even just still feels wrong right now, but the Lakers have attempted 1,539 free throws to 1,045 free throw attempts for their opponent. That's a plus 494 differential, and that works out to 8.7 free throw attempts per game. I'm assuming this question is in reference to the Lakers letting it leak that they sent footage and lobbed for the referees to officiate better on them, that they believe there was missed calls. What I will say is LeBron remains a very difficult player to referee, and what they're probably pointing out the most is he's being fouled on 5.6% of his drives this year. That's down from 8.8% last year, which is down from 9.5% the year before. When you look at LeBron, I don't think that he's not bailing out sooner on his drives. They're not more wide open lanes. The Lakers spacing is not that, open. So I think, do they have a case there? I don't know, but I think that's what it's in reference to. And it's fair to monitor because 5.6% foul rate on drives for LeBron is a very, very low rate. Someone can go check that 57 game thing. I promise you, was this the question I did after I took an edible on Saturday? I have no idea, but I spent time and I triple checked it. I promise. Maybe I'm wrong just because plus 8.7 per game. I think when you break it down that way, that's not ridiculous, but I was surprised that they took about 500 free throws more than their opponents during this span. We're still, look at me just blazing through this. This has been under an hour still. So let's keep going. Next question we'll go to, this one's fun. Rooston Hawkins. What is the math behind the Houston Rockets' success? I would love to go into more detail about this team with Grant. We'll have to do our surprise sustainability pod, not this week, maybe the following week. So I'm just going to throw out some numbers here and some observations from what I've seen, but that I think are sort of defining. Now let's get to the outlier stuff. Opponents are shooting 29.1% from 3 against them. That's not going to hold. It's funny how fans from every team really think that their defense is responsible for teams shooting so poorly from 3. It can contribute to it, but I don't want to hear because of how much pressure we put on the perimeter, because of the shooters that we're leaving open. Yes, you can do that, but there have been, Seth Partnow, I believe, has written extensively about it. It's called Jedi 3-point shooting. Opposing defenses have very little impact on the percentage teams are shooting from 3. They can more so impact the volume at which they are taking threes. Houston itself is also shooting 39.3% from 3. I never would have seen that coming. Dylan Brooks hitting 55+% of his threes. Now, everything else I'm going to say is, I think, more interesting and stuff to monitor. The starting 5 is a plus 17.1 points per 100 possessions. Opponents are shooting 32.5% in those minutes, but this starting 5 has been very frisky, even when you're dealing with, when Jalen Green before he started coming on. Alperen Şengün, I think, is probably the single biggest reason that they've been so good this year. He is shooting. They've run more of the offense through him, and it didn't even start out the season like that. It just felt like Ime Udoka made a conscious decision at some point. I don't know, 2 or 3 games. It was like, no, this is happening. He's shooting over 60% on hook shots, over 70% on drives. Nikola Jokic is the only other player with as many made shots and assists on elbow touches this year. That's a big deal. Alperen Şengün he can throw passes from all over the place. It's not just someone who needs to be in these handoff situations or screening situations. He'll make plays from standstills. He'll bring the ball up the court. He could do stuff from all over the floor, center of the floor. If you need to put him down low, it's just happening at every level for him. And I like that it seems like he's been more aggressive looking for his shot when he's getting closer to the basket. And I think that bodes well. Fred VanVleet, yes, the shooting splits, they have not looked great, but he has come and he has given them a rhyme and reason to what they're doing on offense. Now, part of that, this was a team stat, they're 6th in turnover rate. That's a big fucking deal. It helps having lower turnover guys who are going to play make for you, like Fred VanVleet, like Şengün, even Jalen Green relative to his volume. Sub 12 turnover rate, that's fine. Fred VanVleet specifically, though, is assisting on over 30% of Houston's made buckets when he's on the court and posting a turnover below 10%. Here is every player who has had a 30 plus assist rate and a sub 10% turnover rate for an entire season. DeMar DeRozan, Mike Conley did it twice because he's Mike fucking Conley, Michael Jordan, and Gus Williams. That's wild. That's absolutely wild. Do I think Fred VanVleet will maintain that? He could. He's never been this super high turnover guy. And I think even when his shots aren't falling, I know he's been all over the place inside the arc, defenses react to him, guys, and they're going to load up or like overreact is maybe the best way to phrase it. And he's going to find people, even if it's not directly leading to assists. Like, it just creates this crispness, and you can see the value of just having that. It's not even an adult in the room on offense, because aside from him just attempting these wild passes, Alperen Şengün plays like an adult on offense. That is a grown adult on the offensive end. It's just someone who you can trust. And another big thing here, so 2 things that are standing out, actually. Houston is 7th in effective field goal percentage on catch and shoot jumpers. That's actually, I'm impressed, because playing Dillon Brooks so many minutes, looking at some of the other guys that you're playing, like even just having Alperen Şengün and Jabari Smith Jr. out there. When I looked at their rotation, I would not have necessarily predicted them to be an efficient spot up team where they're able to space the floor on their jumpers. So catch and shoot jumpers to be ranked that highly. The other thing here that's been a big part of that, not just Dillon Brooks shooting 55% from 3, he was attempting about 5 pull-up jumpers per game last year. He's at under 2 for this season. And so he has slashed that volume by more than more than half. And so he's taking 2 pull-up jumpers per game from Dillon Brooks. Fine. You're not going to see me blanch about that. And then let's talk about the defense that he has played. And I hope that we weren't trolling the way the Grizzlies got rid of him last year. I'm pretty sure we were on this podcast and said, why would you be so public about getting rid of him? We've definitely trolled Dillon Brooks before, and he's earned it. But people who thought he didn't help drive what Memphis became at points, even as imperfect as they were, I hope we acknowledge that on this podcast, or at least like acknowledge that it was, and I'm pretty sure we did, that it was weird the way that the Grizzlies just decided to scapegoat him. But the Lakers averaged 0.69 points per possession as a team when he spent any time on LeBron. The Rockets won that game. The Warriors averaged 0.75 points per possession as a team on any possession that Dillon Brooks spent time on Steph. They did lose that game. The Pelicans averaged 0.87 points per possession as a team when he spent any time guarding Brandon Ingram. They won that game. Those are the numbers driving the success for the Rockets right now. Will it sustain? I have no idea. We'll have to get into deeper that now. I think let's look at the clock here. I might have time for one more. So let's go fishing in Discord. We have other ones on Twitter, but if I'm not going to be as prepped, let's give it to a Discord member, since you guys are thrown in, and I love you all for it. Pods all the time. Oh, let's make this a selfish one. Would you like some peek behind the curtain? Austin asks, in general, how much recording gets skimmed off in editing? Very little, because when it's a full episode of podcast, I want the realness to be in there, where if there's going to be pauses from Grant and I, especially during stat padding, I have my or I'm a like guy. Grant's an guy. I hope he knows that. I hope I'm not breaking any news for him. And so I would love to cut that out. And there are programs that can, the jump cuts. I don't know how much I trust them. Generally, though, I'm not cutting out. Like, we've never, and we don't say anything inflammatory. I guess some people react in the YouTube comments like we do, but we don't ever say anything super inflammatory. We might put our foot in our mouth. We're at the top of this podcast, me selling Kelly Oubre Jr. fucks like I'm some 18-year-old kid. But like, that's the extent of it. And so there's not a ton of editing that goes there. What will happen is if my internet goes out or there's, Grant's internet freezes, something happens there and I have to go back and edit like 10 or 15 minutes. More editing happens on the ground floor when I'm posting clips from the episodes. I will try and cut out some silences just to keep them between. I like to be 8 and 9 minutes, but we don't like to go higher than 12 now. We used to, and we've posted some longer ones, but I used to just, if we talked about the Timberwolves for 17 minutes, that's going up as its own clip if I thought it was a good clip. I now try which is maybe why people are reacting the way they do in the comments, is they don't get the full Timberwolves discussion, but I am linking out to the full episode. That's how clips work, folks. And most of the editing, I don't know how much the listeners of the full audio episodes follow our shorts content or our TikTok content. That commands, aside from the podcast, like prep and recording, to where I would say let's use this mailbag as an example. There will be times when Grant and I go in cold to mailbags, but for a mailbag, like I'll prep for 2 hours, like watch stuff. If I haven't seen a team that's been asked about, and then recording. So, and then between editing, like, mailbag episodes, like it's about, I would say each podcast for me is a 4-hour commitment between prep, editing, getting the episode up. It's longer in the sense of the shorts that I'm cutting. So chopping those clips down, sometimes, the shorter ones seem to play more on YouTube. We like to keep them a minute or less, is like the highest we'll go is a minute. And right now it's even 45 seconds. Then editing those, I'm sure I'm not as talented at it as other people. I wonder, I'm sure that the Deep Three podcast, if anyone listens to them, or through the wire, both of whom are, under the House of Highlights umbrella that Bleacher Report operates, they probably have their own producers that are doing them. I don't know how long it takes them to do those shorts, but if you see a video on YouTube, and I'm trying to think of a recent one as an example, so Grant had the Who Made More Money. It was I had to chop that down to 44 seconds. It was only 4 players, but between actually chopping that clip down that Grant has from the stat padding segment to then editing it and like to the point where it's ready to post on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, it's probably 3 hours a clip for me. And that's where a lot of my time goes, is that I'm trying to put up 6 of these a week. So that's like between, I would say, because sometimes it'll be less, 15 to 20 hours when it comes to chopping down of stuff, of just these digestible clips from the podcast. And if I was to stop doing that, my sleep schedule and my schedule in general would probably be so much more manageable. But that's where a lot of most of the cutting room floor stuff is happening. We had listener Ian did fantastic work when he was editing the videos for us. But just relative to how much we wanted to turn around, not fair to him. And I don't think it would be fair to anybody who would want to video edit to that extent. I couldn't ask someone, unless we were paying them like a good enough money. I don't know if someone's out there like, you want up 6 of these clips a week, what are you going to charge for it? It's going to be more than just like, it doesn't make sense to just pay so little. And I know there are podcasts that have video editors that they just don't pay, and I'm just not the biggest fan of doing something like that. So if we ever are successful enough to where, with the podcast specifically, like Grant and I, relative to the injury, spoiler alert, folks, the Humble Pies, like, we're pretty successful relative to what the industry is. But the podcast itself, I think it's underrated, but there's probably stuff we could do better. There's probably stuff going wrong in terms of not building the audience up, but not having a video editor, that becomes super time consuming. And that's where most of the editing is done. And I don't think, I've never heard complaints that they want me to edit out. It seems like, at least in our Discord, which is where we get our most feedback, and that's the feedback I take most seriously, unless I'm soliciting the stuff in the YouTube comments. We have a ton of fantastic people who engage with us on YouTube. It was just some of the stuff rankles me. And as I've said to people, I'm terminally online and I vacillate between, incurable imposter syndrome and then feeling underappreciated for the work that we do. But that's where most of the editing is done. And I think I like the realness, the rawness of the full podcast, to where I think Dunked On does this, where they cut out a lot of their pauses, which you want to mainline the basketball content into your veins. I totally get it. But I view us as, look, when I'm thinking of our podcast to compare shows to, I want to be, yes, technical and thorough, but I want to be fun and personable and funny. And I like having that relationship of knowing, okay, Grant and Dan are always going to be together once a week at least, or maybe 2 episodes a week, because I feel like it builds more of a familiarity, not just with our chemistry from two people who've worked together for over a decade, but with our listeners as well, to where like, I know some people, but I don't necessarily know their Twitter handles. And like, I followed some of them back. If I know you on Twitter from Discord, that is really fun and important to me. And I think if I had to compare us, and we're not on the level of them because they have just they've Nekias Duncan and Steve Jones have forgotten more about basketball in the past 5 seconds that it took me to say that than I will ever know in my life. But I appreciate how technical and in the weeds they can get, while also just being so fun and enjoying each other's company. That is we've never set out to be like them. And the podcast has been around longer than them. What does it say? That they're way more successful than we are? They're great. That's what it fucking says. But that's what we've always strived to be. And I think the rawness, the realness of having the mostly unedited stuff in long form, where I'm not going to cut out all those silences, that's more for the shorts, where I'm cutting out. There are segments that have been 5 minutes long that I've cut down to 45 seconds. And so that takes a lot of them. And I don't know if you guys consume, I mean, you're listening to them, so I don't know why you would necessarily watch them. It's the people who are finding us. It's helped drive subscribers on YouTube specifically. I don't know what the conversions are to our longer form episodes, but I would like to think that at least some people, when we gain, I would say we gain between this isn't a lot. And like, look, yeah, do I compare us? I look at the edits that are being made on the Deep Three on Through the Wire, to just kind of see what people are consuming. The Deep Three does a lot of, we drafted this, and so I'm not going to co-opt that, but just the style of where there's the gifts that kind of popped up. And I try to be a little bit more unique with them, where it's like you see a lot of the same emojis or gifs cropping up, and I'll reuse my favorites, but I try and like make it each video feel unique. And I also feel like we're trying to be through the Wire posts, they're not doing the draft shorts. I'm not criticizing these shows. They're behemoths. They have hundreds of thousands of subscribers on YouTube. But they've kind of set the standard for like, what do you want this NBA short content to promote your episodes to be? And so I've taken a lot of inspiration from there. We're trying to see what people are consuming. But to that point, we're gaining between like 5 and 20 subscribers on every short that I post. I don't know how many of those subscribers are only with us for those short clips, or if they're consuming the long form episodes. I'm sure gaining 5 to 20 subscribers every time I post a short is low relative to, again, the Deep Three and, Through the Wire. I think we're as good as those podcasts. I absolutely do. All of those guys do fantastic work. There's probably also something about being in the same room, and Grant and I are on different coasts. That's something I've contemplated a lot about. And maybe that's like, you can have more of that experience when you're just together. And I'm sure every single one of those dudes work hard. I'm not going to begrudge anyone's success. Do I envy it? Yeah, for sure. But I respect the hell of it. And Kenny Beecham is all over the place. That dude, he seems genuinely nice. So those are and I know they've got to be younger. I know Kenny's a little bit older, but like the Deep Three guys are definitely, and that might be the other thing, is we get comments all the time where people say, like, with regard to me, a lot of people think Grant just looks like Lionel Messi, and people were shocked to find out that Grant, they still don't know how old Grant was, but they thought he was a lot younger. People generally think I'm a lot younger because I can't grow facial hair. So I guess I appreciate that, but it's just like the audience is the age demos. Are they going to be as engaged on YouTube? I don't know, like the 25 to 34 demos on YouTube. We have a lot of older subs, which I really appreciate. Someone in the YouTube comments said they were 60 and they started listening to us a bunch. I fucking love that. If there's any, and I've asked this once and I got some Instagram DMs that they do, but if there's any just kids out there, like you listen to us and you're in high school, you're in college, or you're super young, and are we hip enough? Are we trendy enough to really engage you? There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into my editing process when I'm thinking about. I do sometimes think I'm trying to make us be too many things to too many different people, but I like that we can be a podcast where that breakdown on the Timberwolves defense, I know Timberwolves fans were mad because we ended up calling out Towns at the end. What other national pod did that? The Dunker Spot would absolutely do something and do something better. What other podcast is going to do something like that, though, and then pivot into who makes a three? Draymond Green with a backpack, or Ben Simmons do you want Draymond Green shooting a three with a backpack, or Ben Simmons at the line for 2 free throws? So that's what I value about this podcast. I want it to be versatile, and maybe we're trying to wear too many hats, but I'm proud of what we've built here. And the editing I'm not really proud of my editing. I think it could probably be better, but that's what gets skimmed off in editing. Austin, how is that for me having word vomit? Is not so much in the full episodes. I would say if you're watching an 8 to 9 minute clip on YouTube, there's a good chance that there were a few minutes cut out. If you sense that there was an actual conclusion to that clip, it might have just been like 30 seconds or a minute, where it lined up once. We did a clip that just lasted 8.5 minutes, and it was like a segment, and it was perfect. That rarely happens though. And then the most editing is going to happen, and the most time is spent, believe it or not, cutting up the YouTube shorts. And then the second most time, I don't do it because we just never gain traction on Instagram. I don't know what it is. Is the ones that I call them the Twitter or the IG videos. Like they're a little bit longer, 2 minutes and 20 seconds or less. I will try and do with those. Those take a little bit longer to chop up than actually the 8 to 9 minute clips, just because whenever you're shrinking down that window, it actually takes more effort. Hope everyone enjoyed this mailbag. Until next time. And as always, please remember to rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Tell people about us. Don't forget about the question I asked at the top. If you're here, what is the rookie or NBA draft prospect you were so invested in, and then they just didn't pan out because you were too high on them? Let us know in Discord. Link to that's the podcast and YouTube description, or in the YouTube comments. I appreciate everyone for their support, even the people who hate listen, even the people who are throwing comments that I take exception to and respond to, and then will sometimes delete drafts that I have in there. Between these ears, it's not the sanest place, but I'm going to be candid about it. Shout out Frank Ntilikina, and apologies, not as always, because when I run solo episodes, I forget. Apologies, though, to Jared Allen, but also apologies to Mitchell Robinson, who belongs in the Defensive Player of the Year discussion.